JD Vance has been critiqued in the past for saying some bad things about Trump and was asked about it on the Nelk Boys podcast. I thought his answer was really interesting. Take a look.
But I was critical of Trump in 2015, 2016. And I think there are a lot of different things you could say about it. But fundamentally, it boils down to two things. Number one, I didn't think he was going to be a great president. I, in fact, thought he was a really good president, certainly the best president of my lifetime. And so when the facts change, I think thinking people should change their mind, right? Okay, I was wrong about the guy, and he was great. But there's something a little bit deeper, actually, where I kind of learned that the media is so dishonest about Trump that a lot of the things that I thought about him in 2016 weren't just you got to change your mind. It's just outright that was false. So, for example, I don't know if you guys remember this, but there was this thing that happened in Charlottesville where white supremacists killed this girl, and very tragic situation. And the media said, well, Trump stood up for the white supremacist. And there was a time in my life where I would have believed the media, what they said about it. And then you go and read the transcript of what he actually said. And it's wait a second, he actually condemned the white supremacist. He never said that there were very good people on both sides. What he said is that some of the protesters were good people, not like the white supremacists who murdered this girl. And you realize so much of what the media says about this guy is totally dishonest. I think once you accept that frame of mind, you start to think for yourself a little bit. And when I started doing that, I started realizing, one, he's a good president, but two, he's just not the guy. He's not the scary person the media makes him out to be.
Yeah, so I actually think that an answer like this is very good news for Trump, and I'll talk about why, and I'll talk about some of the polling that's going on right now. Sometimes what you want out of a VP and someone who's supporting you is not necessarily someone that's just been gung-ho on you the whole time, but rather someone who wasn't and was actually convinced of you. And that's what J.D. Vance is saying right here. Juxtapose J.D. Vance now with what Tim Walz is for Kamala Harris, who has always been a progressive shill, and you can see how this could be an asset for the Trump campaign. For instance, just looking outwards, inwards, it can seem like Democrats are kind of this machine that just kind of works together. They don't have a lot of room for disagreement. They just go, they support each other. And on one hand, that might be a good thing. But on the other hand, you start to look at it and you're like, this is kind of cult-like. It's kind of weird. The elite is just so in sync. That was certainly the case when Biden just magically bows out and Kamala Harris gets put in there and everyone falls in line. But J.D. Vance being against Trump kind of paints a different story, especially about the Republican Party, because it shows that the Republican Party is much less cult-like and a lot more organic. J.D. Vance, I think, is in many ways he represents a lot of us, where 2015, Trump starts doing a little bit better in the primary polls, and we look at it and we're like, I don't really know if Donald Trump is going to govern super conservatively. I don't know if he's going to be a great president. We were all skeptical, and it turns out that it was actually a really great 4 years, and he exceeded our expectations. And so that answer from J.D. Vance is actually, I think, the story that a lot of us could tell about, our perspective of Donald Trump. And this is coming from a guy, by the way, who didn't vote for Donald Trump in the 2024 Republican primary. I voted for Ron DeSantis. But in any case, if you look at the polling right now, Tim Walz and J.D. Vance are actually in a dead heat in terms of approval. And this is an improvement for J.D. Vance, and I think that it kind of represents this upswing that's happening with the Donald Trump campaign right now, and you're seeing, I think, the honeymoon period is starting to end a little bit, because J.D. Vance was actually behind Tim Walz in terms of approval rating. And usually VPs don't matter so much, but for whatever reason, they just matter so much this election. This election is so unique in so many ways. I've talked about it before. So in other words, J.D. Vance has gone through much of his scrutiny already. He's been announced as the VP much longer than Tim Walz has for Kamala Harris, and so he's gone through that process. His approval rating has dropped because of the smears from the media, but now Tim Walz is starting to go through some fire as well, and now you're seeing his ratings go down, and J.D. Vance is starting to go up because people are starting to kind of understand who he is, and I think that this is good news for Trump in general, because I think that's also true for Kamala Harris. Things don't look amazing for Trump right now if you look in the polls, but they don't look horrible either. I mean, most people are estimating 55% chance that Kamala Harris wins, which is pretty much a toss-up at this point with a slight lead for Kamala Harris. But if you think about it, this is actually probably the best the numbers will ever get for her and Tim Walz, because we're in this honeymoon period, because the media isn't asking any questions, because the debate hasn't happened. And here's the thing. I know the media is going to cover for her. I've been very frustrated. I'm sure a lot of you are very frustrated. But at some point, some people are going to ask her some questions. And all it takes is a couple gaffes to seriously tank her numbers. The debate is happening. The debate is definitely happening. It's on September 10th. I'm going to cover it. And I think that we're going to see some big gaps for her in that as well, especially if Trump really prepares, which I really pray and I think he will. And so I think the numbers are only going to get worse for her. So if this is the best it gets, Trump might not be nearly in as bad of a spot, and it might be a toss-up at worst for Donald Trump. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Please go down below, comment, like, and subscribe, and watch another video.